Welcome to Midnight Casebook, where every shadow hides a secret and every mystery begs to be solved. Tonight, we unravel the chilling tale of Only Father Brown Saw Blood, a fan-made story paying homage to the brilliance of G.K., Chesterton's legendary detective. We'd love to have you along for this enigmatic journey. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, share your theories, and if you spot any inconsistencies, don't hesitate to call them out. Your keen eyes and sharp minds help us craft even more captivating mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. The candle burned at noon. It had started raining before noon, not the honest sort of country rain that washed sins off rooftops and made the world smell of grass and earth. No, this was a city rain, acid-stained, slick, and soaked with the smoke of factory fires and gutter secrets. It made the cracked pavement shine like black glass and turned every alley into a pool of reflections you didn't want to look into for too long. The bell over the church door didn't ring anymore. It had rusted stiff a decade ago, but the parishioners still opened it softly, like sinners entering a confessional they didn't believe in. Father Brown sat beneath the vaulted ceiling of St. Gertrude's, lighting a candle that didn't belong. It was too tall, too white, too clean. It stood out like a lie, whispered during Mass. It wasn't meant for the poor, the grieving, or the hopeful. It had no fingerprints, no heat in its wax. It was placed there with the kind of deliberate care that only criminals and widows could manage. "Strange thing to burn a candle when the sun's still up," came the voice, a slick drawl wrapped in expensive cologne and bourbon breath. The man leaned against a pew like it owed him money. He wore a coat that hadn't seen rain in years and shoes that hadn't walked anywhere honest in longer. "People light candles for all kinds of reasons," Father Brown said gently, his small round face looking up with a mild expression, as though the devil himself had only knocked to borrow a book. "But not many leave them without praying." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe prayer's gone out of style, Father, like decency or honesty." Father Brown looked at the candle again. "Or perhaps they lit it because they're afraid." That was when she walked in, like bad news, in a velvet glove. She wore a red dress that belonged on a movie poster, and gloves that didn't match the weather. Her heels clicked too sharply against the worn tile, each step a confession in itself. "Father Brown," she said, with a voice like spilt wine, dark, rich, and a little too smooth, "I've heard you solve unusual problems." "I try to understand people," he replied. "It sometimes helps." "My sister's missing," she said, "but no one's filed a report. The police say she ran off with a man, but I know she didn't. Elise would never leave without telling me, never without her rosary." Father Brown noted her eyes, not the tears. They were practiced, placed perfectly like makeup, but the flicker behind them. Anger, not grief, not fear, control dressed in mourning. "And when did you last see her?" "3 nights ago," she said, "at the Red Lantern Club. It's one of those places you pretend not to know exists. Elise was working there, not as a dancer. She sang." "I imagine many do both," said Father Brown, "and many pretend not to know either." The man with the bourbon breath stepped forward. "She's wasting your time, Father. Elise went with Tony Morello. Everyone knows that. They were seen leaving together. End of story." Father Brown studied him for a moment. "You seem very confident, Mr." The man hesitated just long enough. "Call me Wade." Father Brown didn't. He turned back to the woman. And your name? Clara Finch. She smiled without warmth. I brought you a candle, a gift for your chapel. Father Brown looked at it again. Ah, the candle that burns too clean. Later that evening, Father Brown stepped into the Red Lantern Club, where even the neon signs seemed tired. Smoke curled like accusations around ceiling fans that wheezed with every turn. A man played piano with the slow, broken rhythm of a dying heart. The bartender looked like he could pour drinks and secrets with equal skill. Whiskey, said Father Brown. The bartender raised a brow. Didn't peg you for the type. I'm not, Father Brown said. But people talk better when they think you're listening with a drink in hand. Suit yourself. A girl sang on the stage. Not Elise, but the way the lights caught her face, Father Brown saw fear stitched behind her mascara. Not performance nerves, the kind of fear that comes from seeing something you wish you hadn't. He waited. Not drinking, not asking, just watching. It's a trick most men forget. Listening with your eyes and seeing what's not said. Eventually, the bartender leaned in. She was here. Elise, pretty voice, got caught up with Tony. Bad idea. Tony Morello, Father Brown said quietly. Does he come here often? Not anymore. Why not? Because 2 nights ago, he ended up floating face down in the dockyard. Bullet in the back. The kind that says, stay gone to anyone else. Father Brown nodded slowly. And Elise? No one's seen her since, but they're saying she ran. Maybe with Tony's killer, maybe before. Did she seem frightened? The bartender looked around. We all are, Father. We're just better at hiding it. Father Brown left a tip and a prayer, both more generous than the club deserved. Outside, the rain had turned to mist, and the city breathed it like a sinner, smoking in the dark. Father Brown didn't rush. He walked the way he always did, like the truth would wait for him. At the morgue, he asked to see Tony Morello's body. The attendant gave him the kind of look reserved for lunatics and priests, and since Father Brown was both in the right measure, the drawer slid open. A single shot, the coroner said. Clean, small caliber, professional. But Elise wasn't a professional, Father Brown murmured. At least, not that kind. She didn't do this, Clara said. She stood in the hallway, red coat over her arms now, like a shroud. She loved him. She feared him, Father Brown corrected, and I think she feared what he was about to do. What are you talking about? I believe Tony was going to confess. Something large, something dangerous, and Elise was his anchor, his repentance. But someone made sure neither of them had the chance. Clara's eyes narrowed. You think I had something to do with this? I think you brought a candle, unlit and clean, into a chapel where only the desperate leave light behind. I think you wanted me to look, but not too closely. She didn't blink. Be careful, Father. There are things in this city bigger than your collar. I don't doubt it, he said, but God is quite large too. The next night, they found Elise's rosary near the train station. Not dropped, placed, wrapped around a rail like a warning or a farewell. Father Brown held it gently, brushing his thumb over the beads. There's something theatrical about this, he said to the detective beside him. Inspector Mallory wasn't thrilled to have a priest on the scene. Theatrical? He scoffed. Looks like a runaway or a murder victim. Both are tidy answers, Father Brown said, which makes them suspicious. He looked at the rosary again. She didn't run. She was moved, Whoever did this knows symbolism, knows how to place a prop just so. It's not about hiding the body, it's about hiding the reason. Mallory sighed. And what's your theory, Father? That this was a staged escape, but not by Elise, by someone who needed to erase her without dirtying their hands. And in that moment, Father Brown knew, not because of logic, not because of a clue, but because he'd seen the flicker in Clara's eyes. Not grief, not even jealousy, but shame. And shame, he knew, was a wound that left fingerprints. He went back to St. Gertrude's. The candle still burned, still clean, still unnatural. He waited, and Clara came, just after noon. She sat 2 pews behind him. She was going to talk, she said quietly, about the club, the laundering, the names. And you? Father Brown asked. She trusted me, Clara said, her voice almost breaking. She wrote it all down. Letters, names. But I didn't want it to be true. I tried to make her stop. She wouldn't. So I made sure someone else did. Wade? He thinks he's clever. But he's a dog with a leash. He did what I suggested. And now, Elise is gone. Father Brown turned, his face soft but firm. You didn't kill her, but you led her to the wolves. Clara nodded. You'll confess. To you. To them, he said, nodding toward the stained glass behind the altar where martyrs bled with dignity. And to the law. I could run. You could, Father Brown said, but the candle would still be burning, even at noon. He watched her leave, coat drawn close, the red now like blood in the grey light. Father Brown stood, extinguished the candle, and whispered something that wasn't a prayer, just a truth. Sin doesn't need a weapon, it just needs permission. Chapter 2. A Whisper in the Confessional. It was the kind of night that made you feel like the whole city had secrets stitched into the rain. Water sluiced down the cracked stained glass of St. Gertrude's, turning the saints into sad ghosts and the sinners into blurs. Father Brown had never liked thunder. It wasn't the sound, but the way it gave men excuses to yell, or worse, to whisper. And someone had whispered something already. He could feel it in the candle smoke that curled, heavier than usual through the chapel air, in the way the holy silence didn't quite settle like it should. He was in the confessional when it came. Not a confession, but a tremor. The door creaked, hinges groaning, like the conscience of a man who hadn't slept well in decades. No footsteps, just a hush, the kind of stillness that followed guilt into dark rooms. Then the whisper came. I did what I had to, Father. You understand that, don't you? It wasn't a voice, Father Brown knew, but it was familiar in the way regret always was. The voice of someone who had once been clean, too clean, and found dirt far more lasting. What did you do? Father Brown asked gently, though he already knew it would not be said plainly. The whisper quivered. It wasn't supposed to go that far. It was just meant to scare him, make him back off. But he wouldn't. So, he fell. There was silence after that. The kind that made you realize how loud a man's heart can be when it's choking on guilt. Who fell? Father Brown asked. But the door creaked again, and the booth was empty. Whoever it was had left behind only the scent of lilac and cigarette smoke, and a wet streak where someone had wiped something off their cheek too fast to be called weeping. The next morning brought more than grey skies. It brought Detective Rusk. He didn't knock. He never did. He stood in the door of the sacristy like a shadow in a trench coat. fedora dripping with the city's rot. "You had a visitor last night," Rusk said. His tone was dry, but behind it was something Father Brown had long ago learned to recognize: the weariness of a man who has seen too much evil, but still can't look away. "Many," Father Brown replied, carefully sorting hymnals. "The poor come for bread, the lonely for light, and the guilty for silence." "This one's not staying silent anymore," Rusk said, tossing a manila folder onto the altar rail. "Name's Saul Rennick. Slipped off a rooftop last night in Old Town. Broke his back in 3 places." "Slipped?" Father Brown asked without looking up. Rusk frowned. "Yeah, that's what the official report says. But Saul Rennick was no acrobat, and he didn't like heights, which makes you wonder what a man like him was doing that close to a ledge." Father Brown opened the folder. Rennick's face stared back, a crooked smirk under 2 cold eyes. The kind of man who looked like he'd survived too many punches and too few prayers. A fixer, a messenger boy for worse men. He was working for someone. Worked for everyone, Rusk grunted. Ran errands for Tony Morello before he got himself whacked. Did muscle for the Dorado brothers, maybe even knew a few secrets about the Red Lantern. But he was getting shaky, talking too much. Some folks say he'd turned to blackmail. And then, splat. Father Brown closed the folder. And now, no one talks. Rusk nodded. "Except maybe you. Word is, you heard a voice in the dark last night." "Whispers don't leave fingerprints," Father Brown said. "No, but they leave echoes. And sometimes those echoes knock over buildings." That evening, Father Brown walked the streets of Old Town. Rain had turned the gutters into black rivers. Neon signs flickered above cracked glass and boarded-up doors. A woman leaned in a doorway, dressed too thin for the weather, smiled too thick for sincerity. He stopped near the rooftop where Rennick had fallen. A fire escape twisted up the brick like a broken ladder to nowhere. The alley smelled of rot, old grease, and something metallic. "You don't belong here, Father," a voice growled behind him. He turned. 2 men, one with shoulders like a dock crane, the other with hands too quick for comfort. Thugs in tailored suits, paid muscle, pretending to be respectable. "I often go where I'm not wanted," Father Brown said mildly. "Then maybe you'll leave quicker," the quick one said, stepping closer. "You asking questions about Rennick?" "I'm asking questions about the truth," Father Brown said. The big one cracked his knuckles. "We don't deal in that." Father Brown nodded. "Yes. I imagine truth is a bad currency in your line of work. It pays poorly and ruins everyone who touches it." The quick one chuckled, though there was no mirth in it. "You're cute, Padre. Maybe we should light a candle for your safety." Father Brown looked at him gently. "I already lit one. For the soul of the man who whispered something he couldn't carry any more." They didn't touch him, but the message was clear. He walked on, coat soaked through, collar up, carrying nothing but his rosary and a question. Back at St. Gertrude's, she was waiting. Clara Finch. Again. Dressed in black now, eyes shielded behind a veil like the kind widows wear in old films. She sat in the confessional, but her voice came like a practiced line on stage. "I lied. Before, Father." Father Brown said nothing. Sometimes silence was a better confession than words. "It wasn't just about Elise," she continued. "It was about what she knew. Rennick. He came to her. With letters, names. She didn't want to be part of it. She was going to hand them over to you, but I got there first." "And you told him?" Father Brown asked softly. No, she said, voice breaking. I burned them. Father Brown could hear the pain behind it. Not guilt exactly, grief. As if burning the letters had set fire to more than paper. But someone else knew, he said. She nodded. Rennick didn't fall. He was pushed. And I think the one who pushed him is someone who's still listening. There was silence again. Then the smallest noise, a creak, not from her, from behind the curtain of the booth. Father Brown moved slowly, quietly, but not toward the noise. Instead, he whispered something to Clara. Go, now, through the back. She obeyed. And Father Brown stayed seated. The curtain parted a moment later. A man stood there, gaunt and smiling like a butcher before a cut. Evening, Father, he said. Evening, Mr. Wade, Father Brown replied. Wade stepped in. His coat was dry. His eyes weren't. You're stirring the pot, he said, and people don't like that. Only those with something to hide, Father Brown said gently. Wade shrugged. What if I said I was just here to make sure you didn't get hurt? I'd say it was a little late for that. There was a pause. Long. Heavy. Then Wade leaned in. You know what Rennick was doing before he died? Trying to find someone to believe him. Wade nodded. And when no one did, he looked for absolution. Even the worst men believe in something when they're close to the edge. Did you push him? Wade blinked. Just once. I made a call, he said, but I didn't lay a hand on him. I'm not that kind of villain, Father. I outsource. Father Brown sighed. That's what sin does. It always outsources the blame. Wade smiled. Keep talking like that, and I might even start confessing. I'd listen, Wade laughed, but not forgive. That's not mine to give, Father Brown said. Only the truth can do that. Wade stepped back, coat sweeping like a curtain call. Be careful, Father. You're playing with matches in a room full of ghosts. When he was gone, Father Brown sat still. He didn't sleep that night. He watched the candle burn, watched the rain ease into fog. He waited. And just before dawn, a package arrived at the chapel door. No note, no sender. Inside, a folder, charred at the edges, smelling faintly of ash and lilac. Inside the folder, photographs, letters, names. One of them was Wade's. Another was Mallory's. Sin, Father Brown thought, is always quiet, until it whispers loud enough to become a scream. And when it does, it never asks permission. It just waits for someone to listen. Chapter 3. The Corpse Beneath the Choir. The rain didn't stop that morning. It only grew more deliberate, like a city weeping with purpose. It drummed on the slate roof of St. Gertrude's in a slow, hollow rhythm, as though echoing something buried deeper than the brick and stone. Father Brown had always said that churches remember things, especially the old ones. They soak in secrets like incense investments, and sometimes, if you sit still long enough, they begin to whisper them back. It was a Tuesday when the choir boys found the body. They'd come early, eager to rehearse for Sunday's Latin Mass, their high voices chirping in echoes that bounced off the nave like ghosts warming up for a haunting. But the warmth turned to silence when Jimmy Martin tripped over a shoe sticking out from behind the paneling beneath the choir stalls. They thought it was a vagrant at first, a drunk maybe, curled in the hollow where organ pipes once stood before the flood. But one of them screamed when he saw the eyes. Eyes don't stay open like that unless they've seen something they weren't supposed to. Father Brown was in the chapel when they found him. He walked quietly down the nave, past the grieving saints in glass, his worn shoes not making a sound. By the time he reached the body, the boys had fled, and someone had called Rusk. The corpse was fresh. That was the first surprise. Not days old, not weeks, hours maybe. The second surprise was who it was. Victor DeMarco. The DeMarco name could still make people flinch, even if the man himself hadn't been seen in public in over a year. A financier, they'd called him, a philanthropist, a man of good standing, which usually meant someone who gave to charity and kept his sins out of the papers. But Father Brown had heard his name whispered in confession more than once, always by others, never by Victor. "You've got a dead billionaire in your church, Father," Rusk muttered, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to wake himself up. "You planning on expanding your clientele?" "I don't think he came for absolution," Father Brown said, kneeling beside the body. The suit was expensive, the shoes still polished, but the collar was slightly wrinkled, as though he'd been grabbed by it before he fell. "You think he was killed here?" Rusk asked. "No," Father Brown said. "I think he was hidden here. Like a secret too inconvenient to confess." Urquhart crouched beside him. "You're not shocked? I've learned that sin doesn't respect income brackets." DeMarco's hands were folded strangely, not crossed like in a funeral, not splayed like a man who tried to break a fall, but clenched together, knuckles white, like he was holding on to something even after the end. "Any idea who might have done this?" Rusk asked. Father Brown didn't answer. Not yet. But his eyes drifted to the choir loft, to the little wooden door that led to the side stairwell, the one that never locked right, the one only 3 people had the key to. He said nothing, but inside, something old stirred. Not suspicion, recognition. Later that day, she came. Lena Harrow. She glided into the church like a smudge of lipstick on a communion wafer. Not dressed for mourning, not dressed for anything holy, but sharp, every inch of her a calculated angle. She sat in the back pew like a parishioner who didn't believe in God but wanted him to notice her anyway. "I heard about Victor," she said, without preamble. Father Brown didn't look at her. He was polishing a brass candle holder, slowly, with a cloth that had seen better days. "I imagine you hear many things," she smirked. "Don't play coy. We both know what kind of man he was." "I try not to speak ill of the dead," Father Brown said. "They're past sinning, but the living still have time to change." "Is that what you think I'm here for?" she asked. "Redemption?" "Are you?" She didn't answer, just ran a manicured nail across the edge of the pew, as though checking it for dust or blood. "I told him not to come," she said at last. "I told him the past doesn't stay buried just because you stop talking about it." Father Brown looked at her now, eyes soft but clear. "Then you knew he would come here." "He had something he needed to hide," she said. "And you people," she glanced at the crucifix, "you're good at hiding things. Behind robes, behind rituals, behind forgiveness." Father Brown nodded slightly. "We hide sins only so they can be confessed, not buried." She laughed then, short and bitter. "You don't bury sins, Father. You inherit them." She stood, smoothed her coat, and dropped something into the offertory box. Not a coin, a folded piece of paper. Father Brown waited until she left, before retrieving it. It was a photograph, grainy, black and white. 3 men standing in the basement of what looked like a nightclub. One of them was Victor. The other 2, one was a cop, the other a priest. The priest was younger, and his collar was askew. Father Brown sighed. He didn't recognize the nightclub, but he recognized the expression on Victor's face. It was the look of a man who thinks he's safe because he's paid every blackmailer and lied to every mirror. That night, Father Brown visited the old records room beneath the rectory. The air was thick with mildew and forgotten secrets. He found the ledger he was looking for, entries from the 1930s, back when the church had been used as a temporary shelter for displaced workers. There were names listed for every night someone slept under the roof. And on the night of November 18th, 1937, one name stood out: Marcus Bell. A name that rang bells only in the kind of places where bells weren't meant to be heard: old prisons, sealed files, and hushed courtrooms. Marcus Bell had disappeared in 1938. No body, no grave, just rumors. Some said he'd run. Some said he'd been silenced. The next morning, Father Brown met Rusk at the city archives. Victor DeMarco used to be partners with Marcus Bell, Rusk said, flipping through a brittle file. Before Bell vanished, they ran a community development fund, which was a fancy way of saying they skimmed off every dollar the city tried to put into low-income housing. Then Bell disappears, and Victor starts donating to the symphony. "And what about the third man?" Father Brown asked. "The one in the photo." Rusk paused. "You sure you want to know?" "No," Father Brown said honestly. "But truth doesn't wait for comfort." Rusk handed him the file. "That's Father Malloy. Used to serve right here at St. Gertrude's, retired 20 years ago, lives upstate, but he knew both men." Father Brown took the train that afternoon. The countryside was grey and wet, the kind of weather that made even graves feel restless. Father Malloy greeted him with the politeness of an old man who expected death to arrive with a gentler knock. "He came to see me once, Victor," Malloy said, "over tea. Years ago. Said he wanted to clear his conscience." "But he didn't," Father Brown said. Malloy shook his head. He was afraid of what it would cost. Said there were still people who'd be ruined if the truth came out. "And what was the truth?" Malloy looked at him, eyes clouded but unblinking. "Bell didn't run. He was killed in the basement of the old Palladium Club. There was a fight. DeMarco hit him too hard. He panicked, called me. He swallowed. I helped cover it up." "Why?" Malloy stared into his tea. "Because I thought I was helping God. Helping the church, helping him. I told myself justice would come eventually, that it wasn't my place to bring it. But that's the devil's trick, Father Brown. He tells you that silence is holy when it's really just fear dressed in vestments." They sat in silence for a long time. "Someone moved the body," Father Brown said. "Recently." Malloy nodded. "Victor called me a week ago. Said someone found out, that he needed a place to hide it, just until he could fix things. I told him no. I thought that was the end. But someone else said yes," Father Brown said. When he returned to the city, the church was quiet. Too quiet. He walked to the choir stalls. There was another note, tucked into the hymnal. It was from Lena. He told me everything. I didn't believe him until I saw the bones. I tried to burn them, but some sins don't burn. I'm leaving. Don't follow." Father Brown folded the note and placed it beside the candle that always burned before the statue of Saint Michael. Rusk came in later. "She's gone," he said. "Lena fled the city, probably to Europe. No extradition treaties in the right places. She won't find peace," Father Brown said softly. "No," Rusk agreed. "But she won't find Bell either," That body was moved once already. You think someone else will try again? Maybe, Father Brown said, but some corpses aren't meant to stay buried, not because they haunt the living, but because they remind us what happens when we think the truth is something we can lock away. Rusk looked at him. You ever get tired of seeing it all so clearly? Father Brown smiled sadly. No, I get tired of being the only one who wants to. Chapter 4. A Rosary Left in Rain. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, the kind of unrelenting drizzle that turned alleyways into graveyards and the sky into something less than heaven. The gutters overflowed with a slush of oil, cigarettes, and broken promises, while steam climbed from sewer grates like ghosts too tired to haunt properly. St. Gertrude's stood stubborn in the downpour, its stone facade streaked dark, its bells silent, its windows fogged with old sorrow. Father Brown stood beneath the arch of the doorway, not for shelter, but because that's where the girl had collapsed. Just past midnight, thin as confession smoke, wet as remorse. She had stumbled in with her hands clasped around something tight, a silver rosary, the beads tangled like nerves. She wasn't bleeding, not on the outside, but something in her eyes said the wound was deeper than bone. He'd helped her up, sat her in the front pew, and she hadn't said a word. Not yet. He'd seen girls like her before, in brothels that pretended to be cabarets, in jails that smelled like gin and bleach, in hospital rooms where the nurses never stayed too long. She had that look, the kind of bruised beauty that made wolves hungry and saints weep. Her lipstick had run, her heels were cracked, and she held the rosary the way drowning men hold rope. When she finally spoke, it came like a sigh across a confessional grill. I left him. Father Brown didn't need to ask who. He said he'd kill me if I ever tried, she said, voice shaking. But I did it anyway. The thunder murmured like distant applause. She wasn't looking for forgiveness, yet. She was looking for permission to survive. What's your name? Father Brown asked. Eleanor Gray, and then she fainted. By morning, she was gone. Father Brown found only the rosary where she'd sat, left on the pew, coiled neatly, as if someone had prayed with precision and guilt. But he knew Eleanor hadn't placed it that way. He knew hands trembling with fear couldn't arrange beads like that. Someone else had come, someone quiet, someone who knew how to erase without leaving fingerprints. He took the rosary with him, slipped it into his coat pocket. It was old, real silver, worn smooth. A tiny inscription on the back of the crucifix. Forgive us. That was unusual. Not a name, not a date, just those 2 words. He went looking for her. It didn't take long. In this city, the kind of girl who leaves a rosary in the rain doesn't vanish. She sinks. She'd worked at the Sapphire Club. Not as a singer, not exactly. More like a fixture, something pretty and damaged for the rich men to glance at between martinis. The club had velvet curtains, blue lights, and a permanent smell of cigars and secrets. The bartender knew her. His name was Vince, his eyes jaundiced from too much rotgut and too many things he couldn't unsee. She left in a hurry, Vince said, drying a glass that didn't need drying. 2 nights ago, after a visitor. What kind of visitor? Vince raised his eyebrows. The kind that doesn't knock. Father Brown nodded. Name's Devlin Cross, Vince said. Big man, white suit, walks like a cop but talks like a sermon, owns half the block and owes the other half money. He came looking for her, real polite, then not so polite. And Eleanor? She ran, left her bag, her coat, everything, said she was going to see the priest. Guess that was you. Father Brown's fingers touched the rosary in his pocket. Devlin Cross. The name was familiar. He'd heard it from men in cells, whispered like a curse. A businessman by day, a confessor's nightmare by night. He'd built an empire out of extortion, sin, and fear, and kept it standing with donations to churches that didn't ask questions. Father Brown had never liked him. He left the club and walked the alley behind it. Rain still fell, making music. On the trash lids and cardboard, something glittered near a storm drain. A hairpin, silver, elegant, shaped like a swan. He pocketed it without comment. Little things told loud stories. He made 2 stops before confronting Devlin. First, the police station. Detective Rusk met him with his usual blend of weariness and suspicion. "Another girl?" Rusk asked. "Missing?" Father Brown replied. "They're always missing until someone stops looking." "Eleanor Gray, Sapphire Club. You know Devlin Cross?" Rusk frowned. "Better than I'd like. We've tried to nail him 6 times. Nothing sticks. Money's too clean. Alibis too smooth. He's got priests and politicians in his pocket." "Not all of us," Father Brown said. Rusk smirked. "Watch yourself, Father. You're not bulletproof just because you wear a collar." "No," Father Brown agreed, "but truth usually is." Next, he visited a woman named Sister Marla. She ran a halfway house for girls with nowhere else to crawl. Eleanor had stayed there once, years ago, after a stint in juvie and a failed overdose. She was soft, Marla said. Soft in a city that eats softness for breakfast. Devlin picked her up one night, fed her dreams. You know the kind. Father Brown did. He'd buried too many of them. "She called me yesterday," Marla said. "Said she had something, proof, something that could ruin him. Said she'd give it to you." Father Brown nodded. That explained the visit. The terror. The rosary. She said it was in her apartment. In the wall. Father Brown went there next. It was a 1-room flat above a shuttered bakery, the kind of place that smelled like mold and abandonment. He found the loose panel in the wall within minutes. Behind it, a small envelope sealed with wax. Inside, photographs. Dozens of them. Girls. Some drugged, some crying, some clearly underage. And always, Devlin Cross in the background. Smiling. Father Brown held them in trembling fingers. Not because he was afraid, but because he had seen evil before. And this was something colder, something calculated. Not a crime of passion, a crime of habit. He turned to leave. Devlin was waiting in the hall. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Devlin said, his voice soft as silk, but twice as slippery. "I assume you already know what I found," Father Brown said. "I assume you know it won't matter," Devlin replied. "You think the cops will touch me? Half of them owe me their pensions. You think the church will care? I built St. Raphael's new wing." "I think," Father Brown said, "that the truth doesn't care about debts or donations." Devlin stepped closer. "Give me the envelope, Father." "And walk away. Do that, and you'll live long enough to see your next Mass." Father Brown met his eyes. "It's already gone. To the press, to Rusk, to a very determined nun with a key to a safety deposit box." Devlin's face didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. A calculation erased, a future collapsing inward. "You don't scare easy," he said. "I'm a priest," Father Brown said. "I've seen worse than you." Devlin's hand twitched. For a second, Something flashed in his expression, like he might lunge. But he didn't. "Eleanor?" Devlin asked. "She's safe," Father Brown said. "You won't find her again." Devlin laughed once. "Safe? No one's safe in this city, Father." "Not really." Father Brown turned to go. "She left something behind," Devlin called after him. "I know," Father Brown said, without turning. "A rosary, in the rain." "Why do you care?" Devlin said. "She's just another broken girl." Father Brown paused in the doorway. "No one is just anything," he said. "Not to God." Outside, the rain was still falling. The rosary still sat in his pocket, beads warm now from his body. "Forgive us," it said. He looked up into the grey sky and whispered the rest aloud. "For we know not what we do." But some men, he thought, know exactly what they do, and do it anyway. Chapter 5. The Confession That Vanished. It was late October, the kind of night that turns prayers into fog and shadows into something heavier. The wind howled low across the city like a warning muttered under breath, and rain beat against the stained glass of St. Gertrude's like knuckles at a locked door. Father Brown stood near the confessional, candlelight flickering across his modest, time-worn face. There was something about nights like these, where everything outside seemed damp and guilty, that made people remember their sins, and some, not many, tried to speak them out loud. At 11:13 precisely, the confessional door creaked open. A woman stepped in. He couldn't see her face, only hear the rustle of her coat, the tension in her breath, the slight hesitation in how she sat. He waited, as he always did. A priest learns patience, the way boxers learn rhythm, through repetition and silence. "I have to tell you something," she said. Her voice was low, with a bitter sweetness, like bourbon that's been aged too long in a bar, that's seen too many regrets. She wasn't young or old. She sounded like someone who once believed in something, then lost it the hard way. "There was a man," she continued. "I told him something I shouldn't have. And now he's dead." Father Brown stayed quiet. "They're saying it was an accident," she said. "But it wasn't. It was me. I didn't pull the trigger, but I might as well have. And now they're coming for me too." "Who is coming?" he asked softly. "The ones who make things disappear." Then she hesitated. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "His name was Finch. Alan Finch. A reporter. He came to me for information. Said he had a source inside the department, something about the Lennox murders. I didn't believe him. But then he showed me the photos. What they did to those girls. What they covered up." Father Brown shifted. The Lennox case had gone cold. Months ago, 3 women dead, 2 missing, and no arrests. Whispers of a ritual, a cult, something worse. The papers had called it urban myth. The police called it closed, but the dead had no such luxury. "And then?" he asked. "I gave him a name," she said. "A lieutenant. Holloway. I thought he'd be careful, but he wasn't. He ended up in the river 2 nights later. You believe Holloway had him killed?" "I believe Holloway didn't act alone," she said. "And I believe I'm next." Father Brown's voice was calm. "Why come here?" "Because I need to confess," she said. "And because if they find me, maybe someone will know the truth. Maybe someone will know it started with me." He waited, but she said no more. When he opened the door, a few minutes later, the booth was empty. No name, no face, no trace, only a single white glove, damp with sweat and perfume, left behind on the kneeler. Father Brown turned it over in his hands. A woman's glove, expensive. The kind not bought, but gifted. He placed it carefully on the altar and returned to the confessional. But no one else came that night. The next morning, the front page screamed, "Reporter found dead in Hudson." The photo was of Alan Finch, dark-haired, narrow-eyed, the kind of man who chased truth with reckless hunger. The coroner had ruled it accidental, slipped on a dock, drowned. But Father Brown knew that sin rarely stumbled. It crept, calculated, and cleaned up after itself. He paid a visit to Detective Rusk. Rusk had the look of a man married too long to a city that didn't love him back. He wore wrinkles, like a badge of honesty, and drank his coffee like it owed him answers. "You're early," Rusk muttered. "I don't sleep well when people die trying to be heard," Father Brown replied. "You're talking about Finch and the woman who confessed his murder." Rusk raised an eyebrow. "Got a name?" "No, but she left a glove." Rusk leaned back, his chair creaking like it might confess something too. "Look, I know you've got this thing about redemption, but the Finch case is closed. The man poked too many wasps' nests. He had enemies in every alley. Cops, crooks, columnists. There's no mystery, just bad timing and worse instincts." "You don't believe that," Father Brown said. "No," Rusk admitted, "but believing something and proving it are two different games." "What about Holloway?" Rusk flinched. "I know he's clean. On paper," Father Brown said, "but paper burns easily." "Holloway's untouchable," Rusk muttered. "Decorated, connected, and if he is involved, well, then we're in deeper than we thought." Father Brown stood. "Then maybe it's time someone got wet." He left before Rusk could answer. He went to the press building next. Finch had worked out of a dingy office 3 stories up from a pool hall, wedged between a pawn shop and a bakery that smelled more like lies than flour. His desk was still cluttered. Files, folders, cigarette butts. No sign of a struggle, just absence. A man erased mid-sentence. The editor, a pale man named Slater, met him with a sneer. "You a relative?" he asked. "A priest." "That explains the smell of incense. Look, if you're here to ask whether Finch had enemies, you can take a number. He was a walking middle finger to everyone in power, but he meant well." "Did he keep records?" Father Brown asked. "Sure. Had a safe. But it was cleaned out. Not by us." "By who?" Slater shrugged. "You know how many badgers walk in here asking for things? You stop checking after the first dozen." Father Brown left the building and walked 2 blocks to the cathedral, where Holloway was rumored to light candles on Sundays. Always in the 3rd row, always alone. He wasn't there today, but Father Brown left a message with the attendant. "Tell him Father Brown would like a word about the dead." Then he waited. Holloway came that night. Tall, broad, polished like a statue carved out of marble, and ego. His suit was crisp, his voice smoother than sermons. "You called?" he said, stepping into the chapel. "I did," Father Brown said. "About Finch?" "About the woman who spoke his name, then vanished." Holloway smiled thinly. "You priests and your mysteries. I deal in souls, Lieutenant. Yours has been troubled lately." Holloway's eyes hardened. "You want to know if I killed him?" he asked. "No," Father Brown said. "I already know you didn't." That caught Holloway off guard. "You had someone else do it," Father Brown continued. "Someone who knows where to dump a body, how to fake an accident. You're too careful for blood on your own hands." Holloway stepped forward. "You've got no proof." "I have a glove," Father Brown said, and I have God." Holloway laughed once. "Tell him to send a subpoena." Then he turned and left. Father Brown let him go. He knew now what he needed. The glove. The woman. The last piece. He returned to St. Gertrude's just before dawn. She was waiting in the pew, Eleanor Gray. Again. The girl who'd left a rosary. The girl who kept running into darkness, expecting grace to follow. "You knew Finch?" Father Brown asked. "He was my friend," she said. "More than that, once, a long time ago, he helped me out of something." "What?" "A room with a camera and men with bad intentions." Father Brown didn't flinch. "He promised to stop them," she said. "And he did, until he couldn't anymore. You warned him." "I tried," she said. "But Holloway was too fast, too smart. He didn't threaten, he erased." And now, she reached into her coat, a cassette. "Tape from the confessional," she said. "I made it. I'm sorry. I just wanted protection. I didn't mean to." Father Brown took it gently. On it, a voice, hers, telling everything, names, places, dates. "I'll testify," she said, "if someone can keep me breathing." "I can't promise that," Father Brown said, "but I can promise the truth won't vanish." The next day, the tape made its way to Rusk. Holloway was arrested within 48 hours. The city gasped, then forgot. As it always did, Eleanor disappeared. Again. But this time, she left behind two things. The tape and the other glove, draped over the altar like a symbol. A silent confession that didn't vanish. Chapter 6. A glove at the foot of the cross. The night smothered the city like a velvet noose, damp and quiet, and far too soft to trust. The rain hadn't come yet, but it waited in the wings, hovering above the rooftops, coiled in the mist like something crouching before a pounce. St. Gertrude's stood half-lit in the haze, its bell tower a broken tooth in the mouth of the skyline, its doors closed but never locked. Inside, the air smelled of wax and wood rot and something else. Grief, maybe, the kind that clings to stone and seeps into the sacraments. Father Brown stood near the altar with a candle stub and a matchstick in his fingers, his cassock hanging loose like a coat too heavy with memories. He wasn't waiting for anything in particular, but something always came. That's what the church had taught him. Something always comes, and it's rarely what you expect. This time, it was a scream. Not loud, not hysterical, just sharp and short, like a secret that had slipped out of someone's throat before they could swallow it again. It came from the back of the chapel. Father Brown moved slowly, not out of fear, but purpose. When you've heard enough confessions, you know most monsters are human, and most dangers are personal. He passed the pews with measured steps, the flickering light casting long shadows across the floor. And there, beneath the crucifix, at the base of the chancel steps, was the glove, a single black glove, palm up, as if asking for something, or offering. He bent to pick it up and saw the woman. She sat in the corner pew, half hidden in the dark, her body coiled like a cat that had just leapt from a fire escape. Her face was obscured by a hat with a netted veil, but her voice, when she spoke, was the kind that scratched its name behind your ears and didn't leave. "Don't," she said. "Just don't." Father Brown straightened, with the glove still in his hand. "It's not yours?" he asked. "Nothing's mine, any more," she said. "Not even him." She stood, slow and unsteady, and moved toward him. The veil did nothing to hide the bruises, and the bruises did nothing to hide the pride. She wore pain like perfume, obvious, deliberate, and meant to be noticed. "Your name?" Father Brown asked. "Lydia Crane." He knew the name, everyone did. The singer, with a voice like cigarette smoke and silk. The kind of woman who made rich men foolish and poor men desperate. She'd vanished from the spotlight 2 years ago. Rumors said rehab, others whispered marriage. But she was here now, and her eyes didn't look like they'd seen anything worth remembering. "It's him," she said. "He's missing." "Who?" "Daniel Hale." The name hit hard. Daniel Hale, city councilman, rising star, golden boy of the reform movement. A man who'd shaken hands with everyone, but never been dirtied by any of them. A man who'd once stood at that very pulpit and called corruption a form of cowardice. "Gone how?" Father Brown asked. "He left 3 nights ago," Lydia said. "Said he had a meeting downtown, said he'd be back in an hour. And he never returned." She laughed bitterly. "No one ever returns. Have you told the police?" "I told the wrong ones." He waited. "They said he was probably with someone else," she said. "That men like Daniel always have another woman. But I know him. He was afraid. Something had changed." "Changed how?" "He was working on something big. Said he had proof. Said people would fall like dominoes." "And did he say who?" She looked at the cross above them. "No," she said. "Just that if anything happened to him, I should come here. To you." Father Brown's expression didn't change, but he turned the glove over in his hand again. Leather, fitted, lined with cashmere. Not Lydia's, too large, a man's glove. "When did you last see this?" he asked. She hesitated. "That was on the floor, next to the bed, when I woke up this morning. Daniel's room." "Not his?" "No, he hated gloves." Father Brown placed it gently on the altar rail, as if it were an offering. "What do you want from me, Miss Crane?" She looked at him then, and the veil lifted in more ways than one. "Truth," she said, "and maybe a little justice. The kind that doesn't wear a badge or take bribes." He nodded once. "That kind is harder to come by. I figured that's why you're still breathing." He found Daniel's apartment the next day, top floor of a clean building where the elevators worked and the doormen kept secrets for tips. The room was spotless, too spotless, the kind of clean that came after someone had been looking for something, and then something else had been looking for the first someone. There were no signs of violence, no blood, no struggle, just absence. Absence and a faint whiff of cigar smoke clinging to the curtains, smoke that didn't match Daniel's usual scent. Father Brown searched the bookshelf. Politicians often hide things behind words. He found a Bible with a hollowed-out center, but no gun, no money, just a key, a locker key, the cheap kind, numbered 407. He didn't take it to the police. He took it to Rusk. Detective Rusk looked worse than usual, pale, bags under his eyes, like he'd been carrying corpses in them. "You really want to stick your collar into this one, Brown?" he asked. Daniel Hale was poking in places no one was meant to poke. "I'm not looking to disturb the dead," Father Brown said. "I'm trying to keep another name off the list." Rusk took the key, turned it in his hand like a poker chip. "I'll check it." "No," Father Brown said. "You'll walk with me, or I walk alone." That got a smirk. "You ever think about becoming a cop?" "I think about sin," Father Brown said. "That's enough." The locker was in the transit station, on 43rd. Inside, a folder. Thick, sealed in wax, like a confession. Rusk opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, copies of bank transfers, names, all tied to the city's so-called reform committee. Men in suits smiling for cameras while laundering bribes through non-profits and orphanages. At the bottom, a typed page, a list of initials, and one full name, Lydia Crane. Rusk looked up. He was going to take them all down, including her. Father Brown took the paper. No, he was protecting her. She's listed. She was a witness, not a player. How can you be sure? Because she brought me a glove. Rusk wasn't convinced, but he didn't stop Father Brown when he left with the file. He found Lydia back at the church, standing where she'd first left the glove. He knew, Father Brown said, everything, and he trusted you enough to keep it safe. Tears formed at the corners of her eyes. Then why didn't he tell me? Because some truths are heavier when shared. She nodded. So what now? Now, Father Brown said, you tell me the one thing you haven't yet. She blinked. What? You said the glove was left beside the bed. Yes, but it wasn't. It was placed at the foot of the cross. Her lips parted, then closed again. Her hands trembled. I didn't know what else to do, she said. He was dead when I came home. Cold. Slumped in the chair. Father Brown waited. I panicked, she said. I moved him. I thought they'd blame me. So you brought the glove here to shift suspicion. No, she whispered, to beg for mercy. He believed her. Later that night, Russ called. You were right. Body just surfaced. Pier 9, weighted down, but it's Hale. Time of death? 2 days ago. Matches Lydia's story. Then it's time to use that file. Rusk grunted. You realize this might sink the whole city. Then maybe it's time someone drowned. The arrests came fast. One by one, they fell. Men who'd shaken hands with popes and devils. Lydia was cleared. Her name struck from the page. Her silence redeemed. She left the city after that. Left behind the glove too. It stayed on the altar rail for weeks. A reminder. A relic. Of sin. Of trust. Of the cross that still bears more than wood. Chapter 7. The bell tolled. Twice that night. The night had the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt watched. It stretched over the city like a black veil pinned with stars that didn't blink, and underneath it, everything moved a little slower, a little more careful. The streets were slick with old rain, shining like the grin of a man who'd just buried the truth. A faint fog clung to the pavement, refusing to lift, while neon signs flickered in the windows of bars that promised comfort but served memory. Father Brown stood in the bell tower of St. Gertrude's, coat buttoned high against the cold, hands clasped in quiet prayer. It was close to midnight, and the bells hadn't rung in hours, not since the last funeral. And then they did. One toll, then silence, and then again, a second toll, uncalled for, unmarked in any schedule or service. Bells don't ring themselves, not unless someone pulls the rope, or unless someone's left hanging from it. He didn't rush. That wasn't his way. He descended the steps with the weight of someone who knew the difference between haste and reverence. The doors to the tower had not been forced, no broken lock, but inside, the bell rope swayed faintly as though it had just finished its work. And lying at the base of the stairs, beneath the heavy brass shadows, was a body, male, late 50s, well dressed in the way only criminals and politicians managed, expensive coat, scuffed shoes, and a face too smooth for honesty. Father Brown knelt beside the man and closed his eyes briefly. There was no blood, but death clung to him in the way scent clings to confession booths. Quiet, damning, intimate. Around the man's neck was a collar, not priestly but tight. Red marks. Ligature. He'd been strangled. Detective Rusk arrived before the body had been moved. He crouched with a groan that sounded like regret and cleared his throat. His name's Felix Dalroy, he muttered. Property developer. Big money, bigger enemies. Owned half the West End. And now, Father Brown said softly, none of it. He's been under investigation for months, Rusk continued. Money laundering, intimidation, racketeering. Guy made his fortune turning poor neighborhoods into condos no one could afford. And made enemies doing it. Plenty. But most of them were the kind who couldn't get close. Father Brown looked again at the hands. No struggle, no defensive wounds. He knew the person who killed him. Or he thought he did. That afternoon, a woman arrived at the chapel. Red lips, black veil, heels that clacked too loudly for grief. She walked like she knew exactly who she was and how much it cost. Father Brown was arranging candles for Vespers. She didn't wait for permission. You found Felix, she said, voice sharp and low. I did. Did he say anything before he died? Father Brown looked at her. You think this is a deathbed confession? I think he had a lot to confess. He studied her carefully. And you are? Vivian Dalroy, his wife. Widow now, I suppose. Unless you're one of those priests who believes in resurrection. I believe in redemption, he said. It's harder. She gave a bitter smile. Then Felix never stood a chance. What was your relationship with him? Complicated, loveless, profitable. And now? Now I need to know who killed him. Not for justice, Father. For leverage, Father Brown didn't flinch. That's a dangerous thing to admit in a church. She leaned in. I didn't come for salvation. I came because he kept something here. Something in this church. What? I don't know. But he mentioned it. Once. Said that if anything happened to him, I should look beneath the bells. 2 rings means it started, he said. Father Brown's eyes narrowed. And now, you think it's your turn. She reached into her purse and handed him a photograph. Old. Black and white. 3 people. Felix, a younger man in a police uniform, and a woman with a blurred face. He said, this was the key, Vivian said, but I don't recognize her. Father Brown nodded slowly. I do. The woman was Sister Amelia. Dead 5 years. She'd served at St. Gertrude's for decades, ran the orphanage kitchen with a ladle in one hand and scripture in the other, but she'd once gone by another name, before the habit, before the vows, an informant, a whistleblower in a real estate scandal that had nearly destroyed City Hall. She came to him with evidence, Father Brown said, and he buried it, probably in exchange for silence, or maybe something darker. Vivian lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. He kept telling me that if the bells rang twice, the past had finally caught up. I thought it was just paranoia. Paranoia and guilt are close cousins, Father Brown said. He went back to the bell tower. The rope still hung, still swayed faintly when the door creaked open. But what drew his eye now was a small brass plate at the base of the column, newly polished. Beneath it, he found a key. Locker 222, Union Storage. He recognized the logo. The locker contained files, photographs, names, a map. Every property Felix had acquired. Red circles marked 6 of them. All the same pattern. Burned down just before purchase. Accidental fires, officially. But fire inspectors had been paid. Witnesses had vanished. And in one corner, a note in Felix's handwriting. She knows. She always knew. If I die, it's her. No name. Just that. He brought the evidence to Rusk, who didn't look pleased. Vivian? I think not, Father Brown said. It's too neat. Too scripted. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a crime of positioning. You think someone wanted the file to surface? I think someone wanted her to burn for it. That night, he returned to St. Gertrude's. The fog was heavier now, a wet blanket suffocating the world outside. Inside, the lights flickered low. A shape moved near the altar. Vivian. I thought you might come back, he said. She turned. Her eyes were red, but not from crying. I didn't kill him, Father. I know. But I lied about the photo. I know that too. She sat in the front pew, hands trembling. It wasn't just business between us. There was something once. Before the money, before the betrayal. And now I want to live. And I want to stop running. He sat beside her. Then stop. I can't, because I think I know who killed him. Tell me. Detective Rusk. Father Brown didn't react. Felix paid him off, she continued. Years ago, for burying the arson cases. But lately, Felix said Rusk was nervous, like someone had found out. Maybe Sister Amelia. Maybe someone else. Maybe Felix started keeping records. Father Brown considered it. Rusk is many things, but he's not sloppy. He wouldn't leave a body in a church unless he wanted it found. So I think he wanted me to find it. Why you? Because sin recognizes its own shadow. Rusk came to the chapel an hour later, alone. You know? He asked. I know enough, Father Brown said. You going to turn me in? I don't carry handcuffs. Rusk sighed. I did what I had to do. He was going to name names, mine included. So you killed him? No, Rusk said. Vivian did. Father Brown looked at him. That's not true. Rusk nodded. No, but it's what the file says. Father Brown stood. Why bring it here? To make it right. Or make it feel that way. You can't buy forgiveness with misdirection. No, Rusk said, but you can buy time. And what will you do with it? Burn. He left before dawn. Vivian disappeared 2 days later. No trace. Just the photo left behind on the pew. And at the foot of the cross, beneath the bell, rope that never rang again, someone placed a badge. Not polished, just tarnished enough to be honest. Chapter 8. Her eyes lied. Her hands didn't. The rain came hard that night. No gentle warning, no teasing drizzle, just a sudden slap of water against the city like it had something to wash away, but knew it was too late. The streets turned black and shiny, every puddle a lie reflecting neon signs that didn't mean what they said. The drunks stumbled home under flickering marquees, advertising love stories no one believed in, and the sinners kept to the shadows where regret and danger blurred into the same silhouette. At St. Gertrude's, the windows steamed from inside, and the air carried the ghost of incense, the kind burned too often to cover the stench of something more permanent. Father Brown stood in the vestibule, coat collar turned up, eyes to the door. He wasn't expecting her, but he wasn't surprised either when she appeared like a line from an old psalm. Beautiful, broken, and meant to be repeated. She walked in with a posture that said confidence and eyes that said almost everything else. She wore black gloves that clung like secrets and heels that announced every step as though they were accusations. But it was the silence that followed her that said the most. A silence that wasn't holy. It was calculating. She said her name was Isadora Lang. The name rolled off her tongue like champagne over glass, smooth, cold, and practiced. She said she needed guidance. She said she'd lost her way. But Father Brown had been listening to confessions, too long to trust what people said with their lips. The truth was always in the hands, the way they fidgeted, clenched, or stilled at the wrong time. And hers were perfectly still. Too still. She asked for the confessional. He obliged. Inside the booth, her voice came low and liquid, like someone who knew how to make lies sound like poetry. "There's a man missing," she said. "Name's Juno Keene. You may have heard of him. Father Brown had. Juno Keene owned half the jazz clubs between 7th and Vine. He ran his empire from a velvet booth at the Foxglove Lounge, dressed like a saint and backed by devils. He was known for two things: his ability to disappear when the law got close, and his taste for women who could ruin him. Isadora sounded like the latter. He disappeared 3 nights ago," she continued. "Left the club early, said he needed air, never came back." "And you're concerned for his soul?" Father Brown asked. There was a pause, then a quiet laugh. "I'm concerned for mine." He waited. "I was the last one to see him. He said something before he left. Said he was done hiding, that he had a file. Said he was going to burn it, or confess. I don't know which. And then, poof." Father Brown didn't respond. She added, "I think someone made him disappear, and they think I know more than I do." "What do you know?" he asked. Another pause. "Only that he was scared. And when Juno gets scared, people get dead." When she stepped out of the booth, her face was calm, almost serene. But her gloves, they were damp now, not from rain, from sweat. Fear has a way of bleeding through silk. Father Brown knew something was wrong, not just with her story, but with her. Her eyes were too precise. They hit the right notes, looked away at the right moments, shimmered, with just enough guilt to convince most men. But her hands, they betrayed her. She hadn't meant to clench the fabric of the kneeler so tightly, hadn't realized she'd left a single long thread tugged loose in panic. He followed it. The Foxglove Lounge was warm inside and full of shadows, shaped like men who didn't want to be known. A trumpet wailed in the background, and smoke hung in the air like a promise someone never meant to keep. Behind the bar stood Rico, a man whose face looked carved from granite and who talked like his words cost money. "Keene's gone," he said flatly. "No surprise. He always had. Ghosts. Maybe one of them finally collected." Father Brown sipped a seltzer. "You knew Isadora?" Rico's lips curled. "Sure. Everyone knew her. Juno kept her close, like a loaded gun." "Did he fear her?" "He didn't fear anyone, but he respected what she could do to him." Father Brown nodded. "And what could she do?" Rico leaned in. "Lie like a saint, and steal like a sinner. But her hands, those were the dangerous part. That woman could pick a lock, lift a wallet, or pour poison, without blinking. And if she smiled while doing it, you'd thank her." Father Brown left the bar with more questions than answers. He took a walk through the alley behind the club, where the trash bins stank of rot, and the walls still bore graffiti that looked more like warnings than art. He noticed something near the storm grate, a matchbook from the El Rose Hotel, a long way from the Foxglove, and not a place a man like Juno Keene would stay, unless he didn't want to be found. He went there the next night. The El Rose was the kind of hotel that didn't ask questions and didn't give towels. Its clerk had one eye and no hospitality. Room 403 was empty, the bed unmade, and the floor covered in faint scuff marks. But the window latch was broken, and outside that window, across the narrow alley, was another ledge, just wide enough for a man to leap or be pushed. Father Brown didn't believe in coincidence. He believed in motive, opportunity, and the small things people overlooked while trying to be clever. In the drawer was a Bible, and behind that Bible, a key, old brass, marked only with the letter J. He took it to Detective Rusk, who looked like he hadn't slept since the Cold War and trusted people even less. "Keene's gone," Rusk said, flipping the key in his palm. "No one's claiming the body because there's no body to claim. But that doesn't mean there wasn't a death." "Just a silence," Father Brown said. Rusk raised an eyebrow. "You think the dame did it?" "No," Father Brown said. "I think she watched it happen, and then made sure no one else would." He returned to St. Gertrude's. Isadora was already there, waiting in the pews like a portrait. She wore black again, always black, but this time her gloves were off. He sat beside her, gently. "Juno's dead," he said. "You don't need to pretend." She didn't answer right away. "I didn't kill him," she said softly. "I know. But I watched him fall." Father Brown nodded. "He told me everything," she said. "About the file, about the people he was going to expose. He was tired of hiding, tired of paying for the sins of others." "Then why didn't you stop him?" She looked down at her hands. "Because I thought he deserved it. And then, when I saw him go, I wasn't sure anymore." He said nothing. "I tried to reach him, but I didn't scream. I didn't run to the window. I just stood there." "Your eyes lied," Father Brown said gently. "But your hands didn't." She looked up at him. "What now?" "Now, you tell the truth. About who else was there. About the man who followed Juno to the El Rose. About the money you didn't take. About the justice you didn't believe in, until it was too late." She cried then. Not pretty tears. Not dramatic. Just human. The next morning, she testified. Rico was arrested. The ledger Juno had hidden, the one with every name and every payment, surfaced with it. It brought down 6 city officials and 2 cops. A 7th tried to run. He didn't make it. And Isadora, she vanished. Again. But one day, weeks later, Father Brown found something on the chapel step. A pair of black gloves, folded, and beneath them, a note. "I couldn't scream, but maybe I can speak now." He lit a candle and whispered a prayer, not for Juno, but for the woman who had finally let her hands do the talking. Chapter 9. The Shadow That Waited by the Gate. The city never really slept. It just shifted between states of unrest. At midnight, the lights from the streetcars washed everything in pale gold and shadow, stretching along the slick pavement like lies whispered in a courtroom. St. Gertrude's bell tower stood still in the fog, its silhouette just visible behind the cemetery gates, where the iron bars bent slightly inward like they were always ready to close on something. Father Brown had just finished locking the side chapel when he noticed it, the shape standing motionless by the cemetery wall, just inside the gate, not moving, not waiting to be let in, just watching, like a secret that wasn't yet ready to be told. He didn't approach, not right away. Shadows have their reasons. Instead, he stood under the archway, coat collar turned up, hands folded, like a man thinking through an equation of sin and fear. He had learned long ago that people only stood outside churches when they were carrying something too heavy to bring inside. And sure enough, the figure eventually turned and slipped into the street lamp's beam. Tall, coat draped long, and a face half hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Male, maybe 40, eyes too still. Then the man walked away, fast, as if he decided against something. But he left something behind, a paper tucked between the gate bars. Father Brown retrieved it after the footsteps vanished. It was a funeral notice, unmarked, no name, no date, just a red wax seal over a blank card and a single line. He returns tonight. Forgive us. There are notes that demand a reaction. This one merely whispered a riddle, which was worse. Father Brown took it inside, placed it beneath the candle at the altar, and sat. He didn't sleep that night. Some messages are meant to keep you awake. By morning, the body was found. It was slumped against the statue of Saint Jude in the courtyard, head tilted back, eyes wide in permanent surprise. No blood, no visible wound. Just a small ring of ash around the man's shoes, as if he'd stood in something sacred and been burned anyway. Detective Rusk arrived with his usual grimace and an overcoat that looked 1 week away from giving up. Name's Benedict Carr, Rusk muttered. Retired city engineer. Lived alone. No priors. Found dead outside a church, with his hands folded like he expected it. Father Brown knelt and examined the fingers. Calloused, mechanical, but someone had cleaned the nails. Too clean, like a man expecting judgment and wanting to look tidy for it. He knew he'd die here, Father Brown said, but he didn't bring a weapon. No, Rusk replied, but someone else might have. There's bruising around the ribs, like someone wanted to make a point. Rusk lit a cigarette. Here's the part that stinks. Carr's name just came up in the Lennox files. The arson cases. Turns out he signed off on permits for every condemned building that burned. Always last minute, always after hours, covered his tracks clean. Father Brown didn't speak. He looked toward the gate, then back to the candle. He came for absolution, or to get ahead of something. He was behind, Father Brown said softly. He always was. Later that day, she came. Her name was Valerie Sloane. She wore fur that hadn't seen a real winter and gloves stitched too delicately for anything honest. Her voice was lacquered in smoke and old grief. I was his niece, she said. Benedict's. I'm the only family he had left. Father Brown nodded. Did you know what he did? I knew he regretted it. And what did he come to confess? She smiled. Not sweetly. That depends. Are you recording? No. Then maybe I'll tell you what he didn't do. Which was? Speak up. Father Brown studied her. You're protecting someone. I'm protecting what's left of his name. He shook his head gently. No, you're protecting something else. Something living. She said nothing. He changed tactics. Did you see a man at the gate last night? Valerie tensed. No. But you know who he is. I know ghosts, Father. They rarely knock. He didn't press. Not then. But she left a card on the table as she walked away. White, embossed, just a symbol. 2 arrows crossing in a circle. An old gang mark. The Hollow Men. They'd gone underground after the Lennox arsons. Most thought they'd dissolved. But in cities like this, nothing ever disappears. It just takes new names. Father Brown took the card to Rusk. "Hollow men," Rusk muttered. "Yeah, I remember them. Used to handle the cleanup, burn jobs, insurance fraud, quiet muscle. Then they vanished, or we thought they did." "Benedict knew something," Father Brown said, "and someone didn't want it spoken." Rusk lit a match. "You think the niece is involved. She's not lying, but she's not telling the truth either." "You saying there's a difference?" "There always is." That evening, Father Brown returned to the cemetery. He waited, and just before midnight, the shadow returned. This time, he didn't run. He approached. "You're the priest," the man said. "I've been accused." I left the note. I read it. The man removed his hat. Scars crossed the left side of his face, like lightning over old stone. "My name's Julian Crane." Father Brown said nothing. "I was part of it. The Hollow Men. We did things. Fires. Silence. I signed my name to things that never made it to paper." "Why now?" "Because Benedict was the last, and I don't want to be the ghost standing by the gate anymore." "Who killed him?" Julian paused. "Not me, but someone close. One of ours. Someone who never forgave him." "For what?" "For trying to walk away." Julian handed him something. A locket. Inside was a photo. 2 boys, Benedict and Julian. Younger. Laughing, the other side bore an inscription. "Forgive before the fire." "He was my brother," Julian said. "That changed everything." Father Brown nodded. "What do you want from me?" "Truth, even if it damns me." "You're already damned," Father Brown said softly. "But you're not lost." He brought the locket to Valerie the next morning. She stared at it like it was radioactive. "I didn't know," she said. "You did. You just didn't want to admit it." "Julian killed him?" "No, he mourned him. But someone else made sure the past didn't reach the altar. Rusk knocked that afternoon. Got a name. Carter Lowe. Former fire marshal. Tied to Hollow Men. Benedict testified against him years ago. Case vanished. So did Lowe. Guess who just bought a ticket back into town?" Father Brown didn't smile. He came for revenge. He came for closure. Same thing in this city. They found Lowe holed up in a halfway house outside the docks. When Rusk brought him in, he didn't resist. "I didn't kill him," Lowe said. "I just wanted him to remember what he cost me." "But someone else killed him," Father Brown said. "Who?" Lowe laughed. "Why do you care?" "Because the truth isn't just about punishment. It's about peace." "It was the girl," Lowe said. "The niece. Valerie. She said she didn't know you. She knew my name. She knew what Benedict had done to us. She found out about the fires, and she found out he'd tried to make a deal with the city to keep her name off a property deed. She thought he was going to ruin her. Was she right?" Lowe leaned in. "That's the thing about sin, Father. Doesn't matter what's true, just what people believe." Rusk took the confession, but it wasn't enough. Father Brown went to Valerie one last time. "You killed him." She said nothing. "You thought he was going to expose you, that you'd lose everything." "He left me nothing," she whispered. "He left you silence." And for the first time she cried. She was arrested the next morning, calm, composed. The press said she was elegant in handcuffs. Julian disappeared again. The Hollow Men did not return. But the shadow at the gate lingered for one more night, just long enough to know that the truth had made it inside, and that someone, somewhere, had finally been forgiven. Chapter 10. The chalice wasn't empty. The rain was thin that night, the kind that didn't fall so much as cling, mist hanging in the air like cigarette smoke too lazy to disperse. It soaked the city in silence, muffled the sound of footsteps on pavement, and made everything shimmer just a little too clean for the truths it hid. St. Gertrude's loomed above the street like a tired old sentinel, its brick blackened with age and its stained glass windows casting dim reflections on puddles filled with oil and old sins. Father Brown stood alone at the altar, the candles low, the nave empty except for the faint echo of his own thoughts. It was nearly midnight when he noticed the door was ajar, not the front door, but the vestry. It creaked in rhythm with the building's size, and when he went to close it, he saw the chalice. It wasn't supposed to be there. Not that one. It was the old chalice, the one they'd retired years ago. Silver, hand-hammered, etched with vines and thorns and faded Latin. It should have been locked away in the sacristy, but it sat now on the altar, clean as a mirror, glinting faintly in the candlelight. Clean, but not empty. At the bottom of the chalice, barely visible to the untrained eye, was a stain. Dark red, fresh. Blood has a way of making itself known, even when it tries to masquerade as wine. Father Brown didn't touch it. He simply stared at it a moment longer, and then he extinguished the candles and waited. Some messages are better received in darkness. The police came the next morning, uninvited. Rusk, looking worse than usual, dragging a young officer behind him like a dog that had dug up something foul. "There's a body, Brown," he said, "and I get the feeling it's going to be another one of your sermons." "Where?" 42nd and Delaney, in a lot behind the old factory, face bashed in, hands folded. Father Brown nodded once. Who was it? Name was Peter Lamont. Ran the kitchen over at St. Augustine's. Good man, mostly. Bit of a drinker, bit of a gambler, but good. Then someone didn't think so. They brought Father Brown to the scene. The lot was muddy and silent, blocked from the street by a rusting fence and a wall of trash bins. The body had been found by a janitor looking for aluminum cans. Lamont lay on his back, rosary tangled in his fingers, the chain snapped, a cross driven into the soft earth beside his hand. His face was swollen, one eye completely shut, but the most striking part was the bottle next to him. A communion cruet, the kind used to pour sacramental wine, only it was shattered, and the scent of it lingered in the air, copper, sour, wrong. "He didn't bleed out," Rusk muttered, "but someone wanted it to look like he did." Father Brown crouched beside the corpse, lifting the rosary gently. "He was trying to pray," he said. "Maybe, or maybe someone put it there after." Father Brown looked up. "The chalice in my church was used last night." Rusk blinked. "You're saying someone snuck into your church just to borrow a cup. I'm saying someone wanted to make a point, and chose their symbolism carefully. Back at St. Gertrude's, Father Brown cleaned the chalice with holy water and wrapped it in linen. Then he did something he rarely did. He locked the tabernacle. That evening, as he prepared for evening mass, a woman entered the church. Tall, thin, face half-shadowed by a scarf and wide glasses. She wore no makeup, but she didn't need any. Her presence was deliberate. "Father," she said, standing at the end of the pew, "I need to confess." He led her to the booth, and in the stillness, her voice emerged. Not meek, not theatrical, just quiet and jagged. "I knew Peter," she said. "I knew him better than I was supposed to." "You were close?" "We were careful," she said. Until he wasn't. He told someone, I don't know who, but he was afraid after that. Said someone was watching him. Said he got a warning. What kind of warning? She hesitated. They sent him a bottle of altar wine, wrapped in black cloth. No note. That's not a warning, Father Brown said gently. That's a sentence. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply whispered, they told him he'd defiled something holy. But he hadn't. He just wanted to stop pretending. And what about you? I'm still pretending. When she left, she didn't look back. But she left behind something on the pew. A glove, thin lace, torn at the wrist. Father Brown didn't need to ask why. He visited St. Augustine's the next day. The kitchen was quiet, the air thick with grease and grief. The assistant cook was a man named Felix Granger, short, surly, with hands too clean for a man who claimed to prep onions all day. He barely looked up when Father Brown approached. We're not open. I'm not hungry, Father Brown said. I came about Peter. Granger snorted. He was a mess. Everyone says so. Everyone? Or just the ones who resented him? Granger glared. Look, he had secrets, but so do we all. Doesn't mean someone had to kill him for them. Father Brown smiled gently. Not unless those secrets threatened someone else. Granger stepped back. I got work to do. So did Peter, Father Brown said, until someone ended it. That night, Father Brown returned to the altar. He placed the glove beside the chalice. He lit a single candle, and he waited. Around midnight, the church doors opened. He didn't turn. The footsteps were slow, hesitant. You knew I'd come, the voice said. Father Brown nodded. Felix Granger stood in the aisle, hands shaking. He told me, Granger said. Peter, he said he was leaving, that he was going to tell the bishop, that he was going to name names. Your name, Father Brown said. Granger sat in the front pew. I couldn't let him. Not after everything I'd built. He was going to destroy me. So you broke the bottle and used the chalice. I needed it to mean something, Granger whispered. It couldn't just be blood. It had to be sacred. It had to be a punishment. Father Brown said nothing. The silence stretched long. You going to turn me in? No, Father Brown said. You're going to turn yourself in. Granger looked up. And if I don't? You already drank from the wrong cup, Father Brown said. Now you decide whether to spill it or live with it. Granger left, and the next morning, the police found him waiting on the station steps, clutching the chalice in both hands, eyes red, lips moving silently in prayer. The case was closed, but the church never felt quite the same again. Father Brown replaced the chalice in its case. He never used it again, but he never threw it away, because some vessels, no matter how stained, still hold meaning, and some wounds, no matter how old, still bleed in. Silence. Chapter 11. The devil sat in the second pew. It was the kind of night that made a man wonder if God had stepped out and left someone else in charge. The sky was thick with bruised clouds, heavy with unshed rain, and the air tasted of rust and regret. The lamps flickered more than they lit, and the streetcars screeched like they were trying to leave the city behind. Father Brown stood just inside the open doors of St. Gertrude's, letting the scent of damp stone and smoke settle around him like a borrowed coat. There were nights when the city sent him drunks and sinners, and there were nights when it sent him silence. But tonight, it sent him something else entirely. He noticed him right away. Second pew, left side, sitting still as a statue carved out of smug. Suit too sharp, shoes too polished, eyes too still. He didn't kneel, didn't cross himself, just sat there with the quiet certainty of someone who owned the place, but never signed the deed. Father Brown knew most of the regulars, some by their sins, some by their scent, but he didn't know this one. And yet there was something familiar in the way the man didn't look at the cross, didn't pretend to belong, didn't bother to lie with posture or prayer. After Mass, when the others filed out like shadows slipping between raindrops, he remained. "Father," he said, rising as if the word itself was a negotiation. "Mind if I ask you something private?" Father Brown nodded and gestured towards the confessional, but the man laughed. "Oh, no, no, not that kind of private. I'd rather we kept our honesty face to face." Father Brown waited. The man stepped forward, slow, deliberate, and said, "I'm looking for someone. A girl, red hair, goes by Marie. She came here a few days ago, sat in the back. Maybe she lit a candle. Maybe she didn't. She left nothing behind," Father Brown replied. The man smiled, but his eyes stayed cold. "No, but she had something with her, something that belongs to me." "Possessions are often the first lie we tell ourselves," the man chuckled. "You talk like someone who's never had to bleed for what he owns. I talk like someone who's seen what happens when men try to own what isn't theirs." The man didn't flinch. "Her real name is Maria Corsi. She's not innocent. Don't let the tears fool you." "I don't trust tears," Father Brown said. "I trust hands." The man's eyes narrowed. "She took a file," he said. "A little folder. Thin, unimpressive, but dangerous. Dangerous to me and to a few other men who would rather not be mentioned from your pulpit." "And what's in it?" "Confessions, Father, but not the kind you bless. She came here for sanctuary. She came here to hide behind faith. Same thing in this city." Father Brown looked at him, then asked quietly, "And if I tell you nothing?" The man smiled. "Then I ask someone else." Louder. He left no card, no name, just the echo of his polished shoes on the floor. But Father Brown knew who he was. Salvatore Arno, crime broker, not a killer himself, but an accountant for sin. He didn't own clubs or girls or rackets. He owned information. And information got people killed faster than bullets. Arno didn't work from shadows. He let the city believe he was untouchable because no one ever saw him touch anything. But his fingerprints were everywhere, always smudged just enough to confuse the police. That night, Father Brown sat in the front pew, the same side Arno had chosen. He imagined the weight of the man on the wood, the way guilt might have soaked into the grain like wine into cloth. He closed his eyes, but he didn't pray. Instead, he remembered a name, Marie Corsi, and the way she'd trembled when she came to him 2 nights ago, voice cracking like glass. She hadn't said much, just that she was running, that she didn't want to run anymore, that she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to see, and that if anything happened to her, it would be because of a man who never raised his voice. She hadn't asked for forgiveness, only shelter. He hadn't asked questions, only handed her a key to the rectory and pointed to the back room where the nuns used to sew. But now she was gone. The room was empty, the bed still warm. And on the dresser was the file. No name, no markings. Inside, photographs, typed sheets, a list of payments, a list of people, cops, judges, politicians, names he recognized. Rusk's name was on there too, highlighted, circled. Not just a contact, a client. And at the bottom, a note, scrawled in a woman's hand, "If I die, show this to someone who still believes in sin." He took the folder and went to Rusk. The detective met him at a diner downtown, the kind that served coffee strong enough to pass for confessions. He slid into the booth without a word and took the folder. "I was hoping you wouldn't find this," Rusk muttered. "You knew?" "I suspected. Arno's been laundering half the department's bribes through that charity front on the 16th. I've been trying to build a case for 6 months. And Maria, she worked there, caught on, got scared." "Why didn't you protect her?" "Because she ran before I could reach her. Thought she was smarter than the system." "She was," Father Brown said, "until she trusted me." Rusk nodded, slow. "You still have her?" "No, she's gone." "You think Arno has her?" "I think Arno never lost her." The next day, Arno returned to the church. Same suit, same pew, second from the front, left side. He didn't ask permission. Just sat there while Father Brown lit candles. "You found it," Arno said. "I did." "Then give it to me." Father Brown shook his head. "I gave it to someone who doesn't pray with a gun." Arno stood. "You made a mistake." "No," Father Brown said quietly. "You did." They stared at each other for a long moment. "You think your collar protects you?" Arno asked. "It doesn't have to," Father Brown said. "I buried too many men who thought bullets beat truth." Arno smiled. "Truth's expensive. Most people can't afford it. That's why it's priceless." Arno didn't threaten again. He didn't have to. By dusk, the church had been vandalized. Windows cracked, the rectory door kicked in, the chalices stolen. But the files stayed safe. Maria showed up the next morning, bruised, limping, but breathing. "I made it to the bus station," she said. "Then I saw them. I ran back." "You weren't followed?" "No." "You're sure?" "I'm not sure of anything anymore." Father Brown let her sit. He gave her tea. Let her talk. She told him everything. She had worked for Arno's shell charity, had discovered a pattern in the ledgers, had asked one question too many. Then one night, she was invited to dinner, offered a drink. The man across the table told her he could make problems disappear. She ran before dessert. "Will they kill me?" she asked. "They already tried," Father Brown said. "Now they'll try something else." He hid her in the old confessional, the one no one used anymore, the one with the locked grate. Rusk came later that night with 2 men in suits. One of them had a scar that ran down his cheek like a crack in a statue. Arno didn't come. "We're here for the girl," the man said. "She's not here. She has something that belongs to Mr. Arno." "So does the district attorney," Father Brown said, "as of this morning." The men didn't move, but something in the air changed. "You made this worse," the man said. "I made it honest." One of the men stepped forward, then stopped. Father Brown didn't move. "I won't bury you," he said, "but I'll hear your confession." They left. The news broke 2 days later. Arno arrested. Rusk's name cleared. Maria relocated. The pew sat empty for a week. Then one night, Father Brown returned from evening rounds and saw a new figure sitting there. Middle-aged, nervous, sweating, second pew, left side. He looked up when Father Brown approached. "Can I confess something?" he asked. "Always," Father Brown said. And they sat there together. Because sometimes the devil comes dressed in a suit, and sometimes he leaves behind someone who still wants to be saved. Chapter 12. Only Father Brown saw blood. The rain came like a curtain, falling on a bad act. Late, loud, and mean. It hammered rooftops and alleys as if the city itself had something to confess but didn't want to say it out loud. It slicked down the windows of St. Gertrude's and turned every gutter into a sewer for secrets. Thunder cracked once and was swallowed by the sprawl of grey buildings and neon lies. Inside the chapel, the candles shivered on their wicks, casting long, flickering shadows across the pews, and in that shifting half-light, Father Brown moved slowly down the aisle, eyes scanning for something he wasn't supposed to see, but had already felt. The call had come just before Matins, an anonymous whisper on the rectory line, a voice too smooth to trust, too careful to dismiss. They'd said there'd be a body, that a reckoning had arrived, said it would be the kind of death only a priest would understand. And then the line had gone dead, like it knew it had said too much. Father Brown hadn't needed to ask who. The devil had sat in the second pew only days ago, and men like that never leave without a souvenir, or a curse. He found the body behind the altar, face down, no blood, no wounds, just stillness, neatly dressed, clean-shaven, hands folded like a child caught in prayer. It was Rusk. His coat was off, shoes muddy, hat missing, but it was him. Detective Rusk, tough as nails, tired as sin, loyal in all, the wrong ways. Father Brown knelt beside him, fingers brushing lightly over the shoulder. Cold, long dead, but there was something wrong, something out of place. A man like Rusk wouldn't come to the altar for mercy, not unless he'd lost his last hand in a game he didn't start. Father Brown rolled him gently onto his back. His face was slack, eyes half-lidded, a faint smile on his lips, but no blood, no wound, no sign of struggle. He looked more asleep than dead, and that was the first lie. The second lie came wrapped in silk, striding in just as the bells struck 4. She wore mourning like perfume, and heels sharp enough to be weapons. Her veil was sheer enough to see her smile, and her hands were tucked neatly inside gloves the color of dried wine. Maria Corsi, still alive, still dangerous. She didn't look at the body. She looked at Father Brown, as if she already knew what he'd found. "Terrible, isn't it?" she said softly. "He always said he'd die in church. I just didn't expect it to be yours. You brought him here." "I didn't bring him anywhere," she said. "He came on his own. Men like Rusk don't go quietly. They do when the noise isn't worth it." Father Brown studied her. "You called me," she smiled. "No, but someone wanted you to find him. Someone who knew you'd be the only one who saw it for what it was." He turned back to the body, looked again. That's when he saw it. A single bead of blood at the corner of Rusk's right eye. Small, almost elegant, like a tear that had changed its mind. No one else would have noticed it. No cop, no coroner, no killer. Only Father Brown saw blood. He was drugged, Father Brown said, and then suffocated. Softly, a pillow maybe, gentle hands, no fight. "You're poetic for a priest." "I'm precise. You think I did it? I think you wanted it done." Maria stepped forward, boots clicking on the stone like gunshots in a cathedral. "You think I'm behind all of this?" "No," Father Brown said. "I think you're the only piece that doesn't fit, which means you're either the reason or the excuse." She didn't answer, and that was answer enough. Father Brown called the precinct. A junior detective arrived, nervous, wet, out of his depth. He stared at Rusk's body like it might wake up and ask for a smoke. "Was this you?" he asked Maria. She laughed. "If it was, do you think I'd still be standing here?" The detective looked to Father Brown. "You saw anything?" "I saw what I was meant to see," Father Brown said. "Now it's your job to see the rest." They took the body. Maria left on her own. But the feeling remained, a sense that something had just finished, and something worse had just begun. That evening, Father Brown went to the only bar in the city where the mirrors were always dirty and the waitresses knew how to lie with their eyes. He found the man he was looking for, in a corner booth, sipping gin from a teacup, like he thought irony was still fashionable. Salvatore Arno, alive, smirking, comfortable. "You're not mourning Rusk?" Father Brown asked. "Why would I? He was bad at his job. He kept your name off a lot of files. Until he didn't." "Did you kill him?" "I don't kill, Father. You know that. I just keep score." "And what did he owe you?" "More than he could pay in breath." Father Brown leaned in. "You're not afraid?" "Of what?" "Justice. You're the only man in this city who still believes in it." "I don't believe in justice," Father Brown said. "I believe in truth." Arno smiled. "Then you must be very lonely." Father Brown left without touching his drink. He returned to the church, sat in the second pew, closed his eyes, and remembered. Rusk had come to him a week ago, nervous, pale. He'd asked if confession still worked for men who didn't regret anything yet. Father Brown had said yes, and Rusk had told him about a deal, one last file, one last name, someone big, someone who could bring down the whole city if the papers got out. But Rusk had hesitated, said he needed to protect Maria, said she wasn't what she seemed. "She's already lost," Rusk had whispered. "She just doesn't know what side she's on anymore." He'd left the file in the confessional, taped beneath the seat. Father Brown retrieved it now, opened it, and read, not names, not numbers, pictures, black and white, blurry, but damning. Maria, Arno, and a third man, Rusk, not a partner, not a pawn, a killer. Father Brown stared long into the night. In the end, Rusk hadn't been betrayed. He'd been forgiven. By the only person who still loved him enough to stop him. Maria hadn't killed him. She'd saved him. From himself. In the only way she could. The next morning, the file arrived on the desk of every paper in the city. Arno vanished. Maria disappeared. With him. And Street Gertrudes stood quiet again. But sometimes, when the wind hit the stained glass just right, Father Brown thought he heard footsteps in the second pew. Not the devil's, just a man who finally confessed.